including the works of old masters, as well as those of his own contemporaries. His goal seemed always to dismantle stale visual clichés and to employ familiar forms in unusual ways, in order to stimulate fresh perceptions and emotions in his viewers. Picasso also comes across in the book as an amusing character at times, with an antic sense of humor. But all accurate portraits must include some shadows. That Gilot exposed his shadows, his moodiness, selfishness, perversity, and casual cruelty, was what Picasso could not endure. When Gilot met Picasso, he was on the verge of becoming a media star. Because he had stayed in Paris during the German occupation, he was widely admired. Later, he became a darling of the International Communist Party. His accomplishments from a lifetime of hard work were being widely shown and appreciated, selling for large sums. Unfortunately, he began to believe the hype and to expect and demand only praise. Also, Picasso turned 70 during his relationship with Gilot, and his apparent fear of death, no doubt magnified by various unresolved childhood traumas, led him to require a parade of increasingly younger women to help him avoid facing the sobering realities of aging. Although non-fiction, Life with Picasso first read to me like a Bildungsroman, a novel that concerns the education of a young person in the ways of the world. But this memoir was even more compelling than a good novel, because it had really happened. I became intrigued watching this young woman, raised by extremely cultivated parents who belonged to the intellectual bourgeoisie of Paris, as she fell in love with, and then fell out of love with, the bohemian who became the most famous artist of the 20th century. Gilot acknowledges all that she learned from Picasso about the hard work and household asceticism necessary for artistic creation. But she had been drawing and painting for several years before meeting Picasso when she was 21. She had already been showing and selling her work. She had developed her own style and artistic beliefs, and she understood the need to guard them from distortion by the powerful influence of Picasso. In fact, John Richardson, Picasso's Boswell, said of Gilot, Picasso took from her rather more than she took from him. Through Picasso, Gilot got to know the painter she most admired, Matisse. A northerner and former law student like herself, Matisse possessed a style and temperament more akin to her own, with his use of complementary and contrasting color schemes to define space, and with his search for harmony. In contrast to Picasso's penchant for disruption and deformation, Picasso helped Gilot define who she was not as a painter, at the same time that Matisse was helping her better understand who she was. But Gilot also chronicles the abuse and insults she underwent as she struggled to overcome the demons that seemed to render Picasso incapable of sustaining lasting human relationships. Picasso, 40 years older than Gilot, presented a challenge similar to the one she had confronted with her volatile father. She was in an almost untenable situation, surrounded by many people, 2 generations older than herself. Some wanted to use her to gain access to Picasso. Others wanted to dethrone her from her privileged position with him. Yet others were watching for excuses to criticize and demean her as the new kid on the block. She had no real allies. But as an only child, she was accustomed to keeping her own counsel. Eventually, though, she was forced to recognize that there were limitations to love, and that Picasso was an egoist with no real interest in her, except in so far as she could reflect him back to himself in a glowing light. When she asked him for a break of several months so that she could go to the mountains and refresh herself and reflect upon their troubled relationship, he refused, precipitating her decision to split from him. Much is made in the media of the fact that Gilot is the only one of Picasso's several wives and companions who managed to leave him. The others remained obsessed by him and continued to revolve around him even after he had moved on to other women. 2 had breakdowns, and 2 more committed suicide after his death. But Gilot was also his only companion